Dr. Meeks, it's wonderful to have you and to spend this time. Can you tell us a little bit about your background? Who are you?
Well, let's start with, I'm Catherine Meeks, Dr. Catherine Meeks. I don't have a middle name, even though I'm a Southerner, and that is really kind of unusual because everybody else in my family has a middle name but me, and I don't know how I missed out on that. But I grew up in rural Arkansas with a sharecropping father and my mother, who graduated from college the year that I graduated from high school. Watching my mother struggle to get a college education taught me so much. Even though she didn't ever really say a whole lot about the value of education, it was clear to me that education was an incredibly valuable thing, because Mama went to extension classes and took correspondence courses and all kinds of things trying to get enough credits to graduate. And the summer that I turned 18 and graduated from high school was the summer that Mama graduated from college. And it was like all of us, our whole family graduated because all of us had been so engaged in Mama getting this education. And we knew that life would be better for all of us when she did get her degree. And I learned so much about perseverance and vigilance just from watching her work in the field with my sharecropping father, who could neither read nor write, and who used to take me with him to sign his name. When he had to write his name, I got to go with him to conduct his business. So I got to be treated like a little assistant for him, which was kind of cool because I really was a daddy's girl. So I really enjoyed following my daddy around and dialing phone numbers for him, and he'd make an X and then I'd write his name. So that was kind of the beginning. The other thing I want to say about my father, even though he could not read or write, he let me read to him all of the time. And he was so interested in what I had to read to him. And one of the best gifts he gave to me was the gift of the Commercial Appeal newspaper, which was a really big, thick paper on Sunday. And Daddy bought that for me, and I would read it all week long because it took that long to read it. But again, here's a person who couldn't read or write being that supportive of me in my reading and writing. And it had a lot to do with me being here today as Dr. Meeks, having that kind of support from a father who was not illiterate. He just was unlearned, because he certainly was a smart person when it came to farming and a lot of other things.
So Dr. Meeks, from Arkansas to California in the 1960s, tell us that story.
Well, when I didn't like being in Arkansas. I didn't like being subjugated. I didn't like being second, third class citizen. I didn't like that my mama got called Melissa and my father Sidney, and nobody ever was Mr. or Mrs. It was all, I didn't like any of that. When we went to the doctor's office, they had a hallway with one light bulb and a bunch of chairs against the wall for us to sit in, and you walk past the very nice waiting room that the white people were sitting in with lamps and nice chairs, and I would refuse to sit down because it just didn't seem right to me, even as a kid. And even though I didn't say anything because you didn't talk about this kind of stuff, but I knew that as soon as I was old enough, I wanted to be out of Arkansas, away from whatever the energy. I wouldn't have known to say that at the time, but now I understand it better. But I had older brothers and sisters because we were a blended family. I had older brothers and sisters who lived in California. And my biggest daydream was when I graduated from high school, I was going to go to California, and I wasn't ever coming back to the South. Now, one should never say that because I came back to the South after college graduation, but it was my determination to get out of Arkansas, to go to be with my brothers in California, my sister in California, and to go to school. I knew I had to go to school. I mean, there was never any question about going to school. It was just, where was I going to go to school? So I worked it out with my brother to send me a ticket to take the bus to California when I graduated, talked my mother into letting me go, because by then my father had passed away, And so it was just having to talk mama into letting me go. Daddy probably wouldn't have wanted me to go. But mama said yes, and my brother sent me the $86 that it took to get to California on the bus. And I graduated and got myself on that bus. First time I ever went anywhere on a bus by myself. Was really pretty cool. You know, and I think about that now. I was 18, and there I was riding from Arkansas to California on the Greyhound bus, and it was quite an adventure. But I was up for it. I was ready. I was more ready for that part of the adventure than I actually was for school. School, because my high school background was in no way preparation for college. We had too many deficits, and it made me have a hard time just trying to be a college survivor, not a completer of college, but just a survivor, was difficult because, you know, we didn't have a good library, we didn't have a good science program, we didn't have a good foreign language program. And there I was in college with people that came from really good schools, had all of those things, and I was really struggling to stay afloat. And the fact that I stayed afloat really had so much to say about my tenacity as well as my intelligence, which I did not see at the time. I didn't see myself that way. As this is hindsight now that when I look back. But I went to junior college because it was inexpensive and a good place to start. And then after going to junior college, I knew that eventually I wanted to transfer to a small school, and I wanted to go to a small school that had a Christian focus. So that brought Pepperdine into my view, because I talked about this with folks at my church, and they said, oh, well, you ought to think about going to Pepperdine. And I hadn't thought about it at all. And when I did finally get around to applying to Pepperdine, I got accepted and got some loan assistance, and there I went. But this was like 5 years I'd already been, 3 years I'd already been in California taking classes and working. And so it took me a while to get through with college. But I went first to junior college and then to Pepperdine. And the funny thing about that is I'm really bad about saying I'm never going to do something again. When I graduated from college, I said I'm not going to grad school, never want to see another college campus. And of course, that turned out not to be true either. So I've had plenty of experience with not saying never, because it doesn't quite work.
So what was your initial impression? You made a good point about talking about kind of the shackles in Arkansas. And then you go to California. Did you feel they were lessened, or what was your first impression?
Well, California was like going on a trip to the moon, and having just for instance, here's one story of having to see an escalator. I had no idea what an escalator was. Never seen one in my life. In a big department store with my sister, she hops on the escalator, and I'm standing there looking at her like she lost her mind, thinking, what is this? What are you supposed to do? How do you get on this thing? And she's gone on down to the end of the thing, looking back to see where I am, and I'm still standing there looking at her thinking, I don't know what you just did, but whatever it is, I'm not doing it. And that was just one tiny example of being so displaced. I mean, to think that I lived in the same country, but it was the country. I lived in rural Arkansas, and the furthest I had been was to Junction City and Pine Bluff, and now here I was in Los Angeles, in a city with all these things that I'd never seen before and didn't know about. And then college was that way. I mean, big the classes, I was in a class with 200 people. My whole school didn't have 200 people, and my class had like 25 or 30 people in it. And so these big classes and all of that was just really unnerving. When I think about it now, it was amazing that I did as well as I did, considering how many hurdles there were to overcome just in terms of my psyche, that all this new stuff, you know. But I ran across some good teachers in college that some of them were very inspiring and able to see my capacity. That's always such a blessing, and I think it's what's helped me to be that kind of teacher and that kind of person, to look for potential in people and look for their capacity, because you don't know what they might do if you're given a chance. And I had teachers who saw me that way, and that was really wonderful. Mm-hmm. One of them was Dr. Leonardo, who was a speech teacher, and he said, I think you need to go and talk to the speech coach, the forensics coach, because I was in his class and I could talk. I could make speeches. And so I went and ended up joining the forensics team and traveling with them and learning how to do oral interpretation and extemporaneous speaking and competitively. And that was such a good thing for me to do, because it helped my self-confidence. It helped me to appreciate the gift that I had. And then I had an English teacher, taught me world literature, and she just loved the way that I did analysis of the literature. And it built my confidence in myself as a thinker. And then the most impressive undergraduate teacher I had at the community college was Dr. Kathleen Grange, who taught also at UCLA and in philosophy. And I just loved Dr. Grange, and I loved her class. So I took a whole year of philosophy, even though I didn't really have to take any of it, but I took the class because it sounded interesting. And then once I got in it, I just loved it. So it helped me to overcome that whole narrative of inferiority and second place citizenship and you don't deserve to be here, messages that I got for 18 years living in Arkansas as a poor rural girl growing up with my sharecropping father and my mother struggling to get her degree.
So Dr. Meeks, armed with your parents' kind of stick-whippingness and tenacity that is just so admirable, and also your personal need to kind of seek spaces where there was greater justice, Pepperdine University, March 1969. What happened?
Yeah. Well, so as I said a little bit ago, I wanted to go to a Christian college. I wanted to be on a small college campus. I was looking to find a place where people practice Christianity, and Pepperdine was Church of Christ related, but promoted as a Christian college, and that's where I got accepted, and I was really quite glad to be there. And I did meet some people there who were incredibly Christian and wonderful. But I also had a rude awakening to how much space there can be between the kind of overt designation of being Christian and the actual practice. And March 12th, 1969 was the night that this young child from our community was murdered on the campus, set off a bunch of energetic actions that helped me to see that people can say much about who they are and what they are, but what they do tells you who they really are and what they really are about. So I want to just talk about this a bit in terms of the impact of this young man being murdered on our campus and how that impacted me and others as well. My good friend, I had a really good friend named Cookie, and we were always supporting each other and being together and praying for each other. And so I was on Wednesdays, I worked in a doctor's office, and I was off on Wednesdays. His office was closed. So that particular Wednesday, I was at home, and the phone rang, and it was Cookie. And Cookie said, when I picked up the phone, she said, "Start praying. And somebody's been killed on a campus." And I was just like, what are you talking about? And so she said that, a boy's been shot from the neighborhood. And I said, "Oh my God, what happened?" And she said, "Well, I don't know all the details, but start praying." And I had this beat up old Ford Falcon car that always got me where I needed to go, but it was, always a risk taking it. And so I rushed out of the house and got in my car, drove to campus, which was about 25, 30 minutes from Compton, where I lived, and found Cookie, and she told me the story of how Larry Kimmons, a neighborhood child, and some of his friends were on campus, as they always were. They came to campus, they played basketball in the gym. Larry's mother, Mrs. Kimmons, had come to the school to ask the authorities if it was okay for her son and these children to be there, and they had told her yes. So this had been going on for a good amount of time. Pepperdine made the mistake of having this old man named Charlie Lane as a security guard, and he carried a shotgun, of all things, in this era of change in the neighborhood. And he should not have ever been allowed to have a gun, and he shouldn't have been the only security person on the campus anyway. But and Churches of Christ have this habit of, Wednesday night service, and Wednesday night everything closes until Bible study is over. So the universities closed it down for this hour and so for Bible study. Larry and his friends came onto the campus, and the gym was closed. And so Charlie knew these children. He'd seen them all the time. But for some reason, that particular night, he decided to get them off the campus. And so he got into a conversation with them about their being there. And they said, well, we just, want to be here to play basketball like we always do. And Larry was saying, well, you know me. My mom came and talked to you. And while Larry was trying to explain to him, he gets his shotgun and turns it on him and shoots him at point blank range. And the child is murdered right there in front of the women's dorm on the campus, just because he's trying to get him to understand, you know me. And I guess he must have been pretty surprised that he was behaving that way, because he had been coming there all the time. And so that in itself, that kind of trauma is not something that anybody recovers from anytime soon. Mm-hmm. And the school was in a complete uproar. And of course, the tragedy is that somebody's life has been lost. A young child, he was 15 years old, just 15. And I was in my early 20s, so I'm a kid too, in many ways, having to now try to process what's happened here and working and going to school and dealing with my own issues as a youngster, and here it all kind of sat on my lap. Mm. And this environment that's supposed to be Christian is supposed to be able to help us to navigate these kinds of things. But instead what we saw was the institution come to stand in front of us, only interested in itself, only interested in, we got to get out of this the best way we can, looking as good as we can look. So it started the whole process of administrators trying to figure out how's the easiest and simplest way to get through this with the least amount of struggle and trouble. We students were saying, it's going to cost you some trouble and struggle. You're not going to just push this under the rug and act like it barely happened and go on with business as usual. So there was an amazing amount of conflict. Now, up until this point, I had never been in any kind of major conflict around racial stuff. All of my attention had been focused on just trying to find my way around in California, trying to survive, trying to make enough money to pay the bills and go to school. And now here I'm in this situation where this child's been killed and people are mad, and it's the 60s and we're not taking it anymore. And it was a really time of turbulence. I had the capacity to be pretty quiet about most things and pretty just on my little path. And now all of a sudden I found myself needing to speak up in public ways that I'd never done before. That was really frightening to me, because after all, I came from Arkansas and I didn't know anything about a lot of things. And here I am now standing in the middle of this. So there were meetings with administrators. I'd never been in an administrator's office before. unless I was just working on trying to get something like financial aid done, but I didn't have any reason to be in the vice president's office or the president's home. So all of just even something as simple as being in a meeting with students and administrators and faculty in the president's home was a completely new and strange happening for me. And yet it did happen, and I was kind of like having to just take that in the best way you can take it in when that much new stuff is happening all at once. Aside from that, I was also scared like everybody else. You know, it was the school ended up doing a whole lot of things that really shocked us, including calling out the police and guards folks to come on campus before the whole thing was over. So all that stuff was really unsettling and unnerving and unchristian. And I didn't know what to do with it.
So before you tell us more about just really having to navigate the institution, as you so eloquently stated, can you go back to like, how were you all feeling as a group, as a community? What were the voices? What were people thinking? How did you all even come to the table with the administration?
I think I want to be clear in trying to just track my own responses and think about that what I had was a combination of outrage and grief and helplessness and how can this keep on happening to us, and feeling afraid, just afraid in general, just, you know, because it's so destabilizing to be in a situation like that. And I think the other students were probably in that same space, but they handled it. Everybody handled everything in a different way. For me, I tended to be pretty quiet at that time because I was a lot less vocal than I am now. So I was pretty quiet about it, but I was I didn't miss any meetings. I went to all the meetings. I was a part of most of what was all the public stuff that you could go to. I was a part of that. The first meeting I remember at the president's house was the big conversation about who of the administration was going to go talk to Ms. Kimmons, the mother, Larry's mother, and the president and the vice president trying to get out of going because they didn't want to have to confront her. And I do remember saying to them, you have to go. And I was shocked at myself because here I'm talking to these people and I don't, you know, that's so out of character for me. But I remember having said that and other folks echoing that you're not going to just send somebody to go talk to them, even though we went as students. I went as a student, and Cookie and other students went, and we went often to her house during that time and following that time. We were mad. We were all mad, and we were not going to be quiet about it. And the university was trying. It wasn't really a university then; it was still a college. But the college was trying very hard to find the cheapest way out of this whole the situation. And so we said some things have to happen, and we came up with demands that we wanted to see, and how the college would respond to that. And of course they didn't want to do any of that because they just wanted to make Larry look like he was a bad kid and he just got shot, and we weren't having it. And so it was like, you don't get to throw him away and do nothing. You're going to have to do something. So they ended up having to acquiesce to the demands, most of them that we came up with. Most of them were pretty reasonable, that had to do with paying for his funeral and setting up a scholarship for his sister and his brother and things like that were practical and good, that needed to happen. They ended up in the final analysis doing it, but it took meeting after meeting and protest and threats and a whole bunch of things to get them to do that. And so that to me said, these people are not that interested in being Christian because Christians don't act like that. And I went to my church because, that's where you go. If you're a kid, or if you're anybody, you think you go to your church and say to them, this is all happening and I'm scared, I need help. I went and said that, and my pastor's wife told me that my education was making me crazy because I was so worried about this and being so vocal about it. And then other folks at the church said, well, the best thing for you to do is just stay at home and stay out of it until the trouble's over. And there was just one man in my church that I will never, ever forget. His name was Brother Kirby. And he stood up and looked at me and said, I will come to school with you and I will stay every day there until things get better. He didn't ever have to do that because I was all right. But what I was most appreciative of was his offer. His offer, first of all, to pay attention to what I was saying, to respect what I was saying, and to offer himself to be helpful. And I learned, as I think back now over that time, again, I learned a very important lesson about being willing to stand with people even when you can't fix stuff. Because he really couldn't fix all of that, but he was willing to go be present with me in it. And that really meant an awful lot to me. So as I'm recalling all of this now, I think about the whole journey of this situation. And from the administration and the school, that was one piece. But the other piece for me was going to being with Larry's mother. And being in her house, and the part that I will never forget if I live to be 150 years old is sitting in that little church house somewhere in Inglewood, California, and hearing Miss Kimmons scream when they opened Larry's casket, because it was one of those Black traditional funerals where you open the casket later in the service and you see the body. And that scream of that lady, I can hear it now. I can hear it anytime I think about it, because it was just it was like a knife that cut from my head to my toe. And I will never ever forget it. And I don't want to forget it. That's the other thing, because it has helped me to stay very focused on what I need to be doing in the world.
So that's a really good segue to really shift into talking about the impact that what you just described has had on your life. You are extremely accomplished, an earned PhD, 2 honorary degrees, author of several books, college professor, a lifetime commitment to racial justice and healing. So we want to unpack that a bit. So the impact on you from all of this that occurred, you are an extremely accomplished person, earned a PhD, 2 honorary degrees, the author of several books, and just a lifetime commitment. Your body of work has always been about racial justice and healing. Say more about that.
Well, that's right, and it's a deep vocational call for me, but it's grounded in, I think, a lot of things, but part of it is grounded in the realization that justice was never done for Larry Kimmons. Larry was murdered, an innocent young child. 15 years old as a child. He was such a good young man. He worked and gave his money, part of the money he earned, to his mother to pay bills. He was a wonderful young person. And the school tried to disparage him and make him into a monster. And then the courts only fined Charlie Lang $500 for killing him, which always was an insult to me. Why would you fine somebody for killing somebody if either he didn't do anything wrong or he did something wrong? And what was, I still don't understand what the fine was for. But clearly justice was not served in the sense of the judicial system. And the university never has, as a college and now as a university, has never really owned up to its responsibility in the whole matter, because they shouldn't have had him there with a shotgun in the first place. And so Larry has not gotten justice. and he won't get justice, not per se. But there are ways to live your own life in a way to speak to that. And that's what I've been doing for the last 56 years. I've been standing up for people, speaking up, and living up to the best of my ability to the idea that everybody is a worthy child of God and everybody needs to be treated right. And it's pushed me forward to deeper and deeper and deeper interrogation of my own prejudices and my own inabilities to be accepting of people. It has pushed me to teach classes and write books and do talks and imagine a world where we actually affirm that we're human beings here together and we need to learn how to live together. That whole event at Pepperdine with Larry Kimmons awoke that energy that I didn't even actually know that I had until then, that has never stopped. I mean, I went from there to getting more politically active and moving, of all things, back to the South, for goodness sake. I mean, I really wasn't ever thinking that I was going to come back to the South. I truly didn't think I ever wanted to live in the South. And then I really realized that is exactly where I needed to be. So for the last 50 years, that's where I've been, back in the South, doing this work, trying to make sure that young Black kids like Larry do not have to die the way he died and have no justice. That to me is incredibly important. I have 2 sons, and those sons are there always in front of me, but also standing alongside them is Larry Kimmons and children like him, whether it's healthcare, education, or nutrition, or war, or whatever it is. And that kind of energy that is, it's beyond just sitting in a library somewhere thinking, what would be a good subject to study? This is not about a good subject to study. This is about saving myself and helping to save others. And it has become a vocation. It is my passion. I will do this work until the day I die. I know that. I know there's no, people talk about retiring and I just laugh and think, well, maybe some people retire. I won't be retiring from this work. It will always be, I will always be doing some aspect of this. And that, I think that's helped me a lot with the whole healing process, because the killing of Larry Kimmons was a traumatizing event for all of us, for everybody. And how people have dealt with the trauma, I don't really know about everybody. But I do know that trauma has to be dealt with. It cannot be just covered up. It can't be ignored. You can't just erase it. You can't pretend it didn't happen, because it just isn't gonna just go away on its own. And I think that the university, now that it has gone on to become Pepperdine University at Malibu, and it's so beautiful and so well known across the country, is still lacking in being what it could be, because it hasn't interrogated itself enough. And I think that interrogating itself and being more upfront and honest about that dissonance between calling yourself a Christian institution, a Christian higher ed place, and then behaving as if that's not who you are, by denigrating and not denigrating people by omission, because in this case, that is what's happened. Larry's death, Larry as a person has never really been acknowledged in the ways that I think could be life-giving and could help the school, because I do believe institutions have energetic systems that can be interrogated and challenged, and that can shift and can become better than they might be if they didn't do that kind of work.
So what kind of things did Pepperdine do?
Well, actually, Pepperdine has done very little. They, the Larry Kimmons, there was a beautiful portrait made of Larry Kimmons that got stuck in the library, and got a hole in it actually, and got put in a closet in the library. And this young white woman who was an archivist in the library and a very sweet and lovely soul, a very justice-seeking soul, found the portrait and wondered what that was about, and she started looking into it and learned about him. She then took the portrait and had it repaired. And there was a young vice president, an African-American vice president in student affairs at that time, that about 5-6 years ago now, that got onto this story, and they decided they needed to do something in honor of Larry. So they put his picture in the library, which is better than in the closet, for sure. And and then there was that particular year, there was a Larry Kimmons lecture, and two days actually of events around remembering Larry Kimmons. But this was the very much promoted by these young people, and when they left, that kind of energy, real genuine energy, left with them. So then the university moved to just try, kind of window dressing, just doing something, but not, you could tell that it didn't have the same kind of energy. Some of us who were witnesses of the event got engaged in conversations with the university about establishing something, an ongoing thing like a endowed chair or endowed scholarship or something that would be a memorial to Larry, particularly the scholarship that could benefit a young, maybe a first generation college student. Well, those conversations went on and on and on, and we finally realized that's all it was ever going to be, was a conversation. And so we sort of have let go of that idea that there's going to be a memorial, at least not in the present moment. But what I want to say is that I think it's never too late to interrogate yourself. It's never too late to look at your history and learn from it. It's never too late to see how you might redress some of that historical energy by the way you behave in the present. So I don't know. There's always a chance to step up to the plate and do better. I think that a Larry Kimmons scholarship for a student from South Central Los Angeles would be such a wonderful tribute to pay to him if something like that would happen. And I would really be interested in seeing that kind of thing come of this. There is no way to get Larry back. We all know that. We're not going to get him back. And many other young people have been killed like Larry for many of the same reasons, because of racism and racism's detriment to the planet. And the best thing we can do about that is to remember them, and then to keep working night and day to try to make sure we create a different environment so that kind of behavior becomes something that we won't have to live with.
I'm really glad you brought that up, particularly two things, and I want to close in hearing your wise remarks on this, and you've kind of signaled it a little bit. But, in this era where a lot of higher education institutions are looking at its history and trying to do some redress, some recompense to some degree, 56 years since his death, we had Ahmaud Arbery, we've had Sandra Bland, we've had George Floyd, we've had many others, as you indicate. What does that say about us now in this moment? What is your life's work and lessons in places that you've set both high places, low places? Because what I do know about you, you'll go anywhere where you need to seek justice. What does that say? We're in 2025. What are your closing thoughts on this?
Well, the saddest thing is that systemic racism is an energetic system that is alive and well on this planet. And it's not going away just because we wish it would. And all those deaths are grounded in that system, that energy system is responsible for those deaths. And so what I want us to do is to keep making a world that doesn't tolerate that energy. Now, I know we have got a long ways to go, but I also know we have gone a long ways from where we used to be. And I don't let anybody get away with saying nothing's changed. Oh, that you can't be that simplistic. That is so oversimplification, such an oversimplification of reality to say that. You have to say a lot of things have changed, but that's neither here nor there. You don't get to camp out on that fact because there's too much work left to be done. Also, people of color don't get to camp out because too many people of color before us paid a high price so we can be where we are. You know, I sit here with my PhD and my honorary degrees that I got in one lifetime. My mother spent her lifetime getting one degree. And 12 years she spent, well, actually more than 12 years she spent from when I was a little kid till I graduated from high school. So if I can't see the difference between the life my mother had and my life, then I don't have the capacity to see. And I have to do something about that. But I can't be happy because little black kids are still not being able to read, getting out of high school, they can't read. So both of those things are true. And I think that what we have so much trouble with is paradox. You know, this is true and this is true. And because we can't deal with that, we have to cancel one out. The truth is, we've made tremendous progress. And the truth is, we're as dumb as dirt when it comes to working with this. We have got so much more to do. And Larry's energy, Larry's spirit keeps me saying, and Sandra Bland and Michael Brown and Philando Castile, you know, Ahmaud Arbery, the list just goes on and on. All of those people say, you cannot say you're tired. You cannot quit. You cannot afford not to always be vigilant. That's how I feel about it. No matter how old you get, and no matter how young you are, you got to pay attention. We got a responsibility to the legacy and to the future and to affirm the present that we have a chance to live. That's a lot of work, and it's hard to do. And I get that we don't do it because it's hard to do, but our ancestors lived with a lot harder. And so, you know, I watch my mother. I mean, my education is a piece of cake compared to my mother, actually. And so I have every right to have 3 degrees to her 1 because I had so much more opportunity. But that doesn't mean it's okay for any child not to be able to read and write. So I'm not, you don't get to check out, I don't think, in the 21st century and say everything's a mess and I'm just going to go live somewhere else or I'm not going to do anything. And you don't get to be so enraged and crazy that you can't make a difference. You got to live in that middle space some kind of way. And it takes a lot of energy to do it, but it's worth the journey.